We always thought that it was the more seasoned professional who suffered from these issues to a greater extent. And what we found is it's completely not true. It is the younger professional. We're seeing, lawyers not taking their vacation time, worrying about taking time off, that their career is going to be, they're going to have trouble at work. Discipline, taking someone's license away, doesn't make the lawyer well. We have to have other ways of seeking treatment so that we can get this attorney back to an even level where they can practice effectively.
My name is Nina, and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar. I wanted to start out by giving a bit of background on our speakers, Laurie J. Besden and Tracy Kepler. Laurie Besden is the Executive Director of Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers of Pennsylvania, Incorporated. She served as its Deputy Executive Director, overseeing its helpline operations, serving as primary contact for intervention requests, expanding its law school outreach, and increasing LCLPA's presence with the organized bench and bar from 2011 to 2015. She currently manages the organization's administrative and financial operations, as well as its Judges Assistance Program, Judges Concerned for Judges. Laurie was the 2015 recipient of the Montgomery Bar Association's Henry Stuckert Millard Award for her dedication to public service in the legal profession, and the 2019 recipient of Karen's Legal Professional Uniformed Public Service Award for the Greater Philadelphia region. Laurie is a licensed attorney in Pennsylvania and New Jersey and received her BA from the University of Maryland and her JD from the Dickinson School of Law in Pennsylvania State University. Tracy L. Kepler is the Risk Control Consulting Director for CNA's Lawyer Insurance Program. In this role, she designs and develops content and distribution of risk control initiatives relevant to law practice. She collaborates with the underwriting and claims teams to develop an executive strategy for the profitable growth of the program. She lectures frequently at the CNA-sponsored events, state and local bar associations, and national seminars hosted by industry-leading organizations. She also writes articles focused on law firm risk control and professional responsibility issues. Ms. Kepler is currently also an adjunct professor at American University's Washington College of Law, Georgetown University Law Center, and Loyola School of Law in Chicago, teaching legal ethics. Ms. Kepler has also served on the ABA's Commission of Lawyers Assistance Programs, is a board member of the Institute for Wellbeing in Law, and an author of its Wellbeing Report. She is a graduate of Northwestern University and received her law degree from New England School of Law. The webinar presentation that you're about to see will be approximately 1 hour, and after that, Laurie and Tracy will also be taking audience questions. If you have any questions for them that come up during the presentation, please feel free to click that Q&A button at the control panel at the bottom of your screen and submit there. Now, without further ado, here are Laurie and Tracy to discuss attorney licensure and the impaired professional.
Good afternoon or good morning, everyone. We're thrilled that you can join us today for this presentation on attorney licensure and the impaired professional. Just so you can, if you have questions, as Nina said, please put them in the Q&A. But if there are things that we do not get to, or you feel more comfortable reaching out to us offline, please feel free to do that as well. Our phone numbers, as well as our email addresses, are on the slide in front of you. Just to give you a little bit of overview of where we're headed in the next hour, Laurie and I are going to share a whole bunch of information that we hope will be incredibly helpful to you when you're thinking about the health and well-being of the legal profession, as well as when you are seeing a colleague and there's a concern, and that you want to reach out and that you want to help that individual, not only the individual, but yourself. So we're going to go through a share of Laurie, share her experience with these issues on the road to redemption. We're also going to set the stage with some data that we've seen about the legal profession and its well-being, or sort of lack thereof at this point. In addition, we're going to look at some of the model rules of professional conduct that speak to these issues of well-being. And lastly, we're going to round out this presentation by talking about how you can reach out to a colleague where you're concerned that there's an issue, how you can put some best practices into your firm setting, and how you can put some best practices into your own personal life to improve your own health and well-being, some boundaries, setting some expectations, and give you some practical takeaways as we move in to this not only busy holiday season, but for all throughout the week, all throughout the year. So Laurie, I will turn it over to you to get us started with your story of the road to redemption.
Thank you so much, Tracy. As Tracy mentioned, absolute honor and privilege to be here with you, whether it's this morning, this afternoon, on demand, and to share this information with you. I had so many thoughts as Tracy was speaking. I understand it could be the end of a compliance period. Sometimes people sign up because they're like, I need an ethics credit. Sometimes we put programs on, webinars, and they're on in the background. I always feel the need to share the statistic. Only 2.6% of us can successfully multitask, meaning you put something on in the background, you're working on a brief. And I'm not saying that we should have your priority and attention. But I am just saying, I think that's a statistic worth pointing out. I say it every single program that I present. And if you were also wondering how we are going to present all that information in 53 minutes, I'm wondering the exact same thing. No, I'm just kidding. So part of this program is an awareness. Every single person on this program today, every single person that will watch this on demand, either knows somebody that has struggled with substance use or mental health, knows somebody in recovery from either substance use, mental health, or knows somebody that has passed away regarding from substance use or mental health disorder. Every single one of us. For some of us, it's us. And when we talk about the data and the statistics in our profession, at the end of the day, we're going to talk about specific studies. At the end of the day, it is 1 in 3. So when I sat in law school and I sat there all confident, in orientation, and I heard a statistic close to that, I was sitting there pointing fingers to the people next to me. And here I am about to share a story that I almost died on drugs my addiction started in law school. And I was the last person on the planet that thought this could happen to them. So I share this story because if this can happen to me, it can happen to any one of you. It can and has happened to family members of yours. But there's also, as long as somebody is breathing, there is hope. And I sincerely mean that. I don't share any of this because I'm proud or look at me, and obviously you'll hear the story in real life. That wouldn't be the reason somebody shares this. But we share it because it's practical, and that just because somebody has been arrested or has struggled with an addiction doesn't mean they don't have a future, and doesn't mean they can't, go after their dreams and achieve them and then some. As I'm speaking, Tracy is going to leaf through the PowerPoint to show some pictures just of my life that went on in my life, because it's one thing to hear a story about addiction. It's another thing to see the actual pictures. So I grew up outside of Philadelphia in what I often term a 2-story home. Many of us can relate to that. 1 story on the inside, 1 story on the outside. And before we were even born, and I grew up with 1 sister, 3.5 years older, my parents knew we were going to be a lawyer and a doctor. So that was the family, like other people can relate to that. They knew what we were going to do. That was the path. They were going to hand us everything to make that happen, but that's what it was going to be. So going through my sister, her childhood, uneventful. I barely remember that I had a sibling in the house because I was causing mass destruction from the moment I could even make decisions. So I was just, whether it was lighting matches and keeping a stack of matches under my bed that were burned out, I just was always that kid who just got in trouble. So age 8, first taste of anything outside of myself, I was given nitrous for routine dental cleaning. I have no idea why an 8-year-old would be given nitrous, but it happened. And that literally set off a match inside me that I knew I'd like to escape what my natural feelings were. Because the moment I had something in my body, I felt, and I'm not saying most people don't feel this from nitrous, but I just felt whole. I don't know any other way to say it. People in recovery, when we look back, we just say like there was a hole in my soul. And I didn't know it until I started filling it with substances, alcohol, people, relationships, food, whatever it was, just the disease of more. So age 12, first time I had any alcohol, best friend slept over. We had an older friend drop off 2 6-packs. We got drunk. We were walking around my neighborhood in Plymouth Township. One of us didn't even have pants on. I mean, we were wasted, 12 years old, walking around. It was 2:00 in the morning. Police drove up to us. We were holding the beer that we hadn't drank yet and ended up at the police station. Of course, they call, talk to my mom, wake her up in the middle of the night. It was actually Mother's Day, 2:00 in the morning on Mother's Day. And my mom said, no, Laurie, she's in bed sleeping. No, Laurie was at the police station. All 4 parents come, and I literally in the hallway, and I still remember this moment, said to my parents, this was really Shelby's idea. She's really a bad incline. Okay. Shelby currently is still a very good friend in my life. She's a pharmacist. She is not the one presenting a program on substance use because she does not have a substance use issue. The issue was not Shelby. So time goes on and, I did what my friends did. I smoked pot, I drank, but everything in my life was to excess, everything. So even when I knew I was going to go drinking with my friends in high school, I would drink a few beers beforehand just to level the playing field. I just never felt comfortable in my own skin. It was almost like I was walking around in somebody else's body. And so, college, my sister went to Penn State. By the time it was time for me to go to college, I decided I would go to University of Maryland because I always felt like I was compared to her, but that is definitely a story that I made up. And so, I went, and even as a kid, my dream to like the poster board, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? What do you want to do? And mine was always be a cosmetologist. And don't judge me based on my hair. It's not a great background for hair, but I always wanted to be a cosmetologist. Always. I still cut my own hair. And so I did want to go to college. I went to University of Maryland, as I mentioned. I was a criminology and criminal justice major. And my family, and I'm just stating facts, made our education very easy for us. They handed it to us. So all my family cared about, they cared about my grade. That was the only conversation we had throughout my entire education. How are your grades? How's school? How's everything? School, are you studying enough? So I graduated in 3.5 years with a 3.97, which sounds fabulous. This is great. Except my behavior in college, I was living in a suite my last 2 years with 6 girls. One of those people, still my best friend today. And her and I, we would get a case of beer on Thursday nights, and we would literally start drinking when we were in the shower. And my thought was, this is like time management. By the time you go out, you're wasted. You don't even have to buy alcohol. Majority of the nights, we never even made it out the door. But in my defense, I wasn't the only one doing it. She was doing it too. So I thought, I wasn't even thinking, could there be a problem? I just assumed because I was doing it and someone else that it was normal. And it's college. Okay. But unfortunately for me, the party never ended. It ended in prison. But for Kathleen, she doesn't drink in the shower now, and she didn't need to go to prison to stop that behavior. Kathleen now actually works for Homeland Security. So very much like Shelby, these were, times in people's lives, and then they matured. And that never happened with me because once I set off that switch, I could never turn it back. So here I was so drunk on those still Friday mornings from drinking Thursday night into Friday. I had an internship with Chrome Probation in Silver Spring, Maryland. I would line the corner stall to nap off a hangover while people were giving literally urine samples in the stalls next to me. And the irony is that I actually later ended up on Chrome Probation. But just this entire story is so extreme because this is actually how it was. But my grades are great. So, and I honestly never knew anybody who was in recovery or needed to be in recovery. My family didn't drink or drug, so I assumed this would never happen to me. So it's now time. I graduated early, and my sister was in medical school, which is fabulous considering botany is my greatest science. It was not happening for me. And we had a family meeting. Laurie, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? And I said, I want to go to cosmetology school. And they were like, that is great. How about after law school? It wasn't really a question. It was a statement. So I went to Dickinson School of Law, and I don't mean to sound ungrateful. I had a great experience. I'm so grateful for my education. I could not do what I do today without it. But here I went in, and people are like, I want to be a trial attorney. And I was literally like walking around with scissors. I'm like, does anybody need a haircut? I was just lost. And I heard the presentation from my predecessor saying, substance use, mental health, 1 in 3 of you will struggle. And I thought, who is this guy talking to? We're in law school. Does he not know who we are? And he told this story that he ended up on LSD and now works for this organization. And I actually felt bad for him, which is kind of funny because I now have his job. And so I go through law school, and honestly, I was afraid to fail. My family, all they cared about were my grades. So I was afraid to not give 5,000%. I studied my butt off. I rewrote the outlines. I was in every study group. I can't even tell you how much I did because I was so afraid if I didn't do well enough that I'd be going to school forever. So inevitably, I was top 15% of my law school class. And third year of law school, and I maintained that throughout. Third year of law school, I was in a car accident. I was the passenger. We were both drunk, coming back from a Pearl Jam concert, went into the guardrail, and we both ended up in the emergency room. I was given, I don't know, it was 20 to 30 Vicodin at the time for a very minor leg injury. That little prescription of Vicodin, we all know somebody that had this story. We all know somebody. Literally lit a match that caused a forest fire that almost killed them. I went 1,000 miles an hour straight into a drug addiction that I didn't think I could catch. My hands are in air quotes there. And I just thought, wow, okay, these pills improve my ability to focus. I'm going to start going to the emergency rooms in the area, in the Carlisle, Pennsylvania area with my law books. Look at me. I'm a big law student. I could never have a problem. And I ended up doing that until I found a doctor on the internet that would send 100 of these Vicodin overnight, working with a pharmacy in San Antonio, Texas, with refills. And so I went from having to spend hours in the ER to then just making a phone call. By the time I took Pennsylvania and New Jersey bar exams, I had 3 to 4 identities going with the same doctor in Texas. And I was literally calling him, starting to impersonate a male. It didn't even matter. But these scripts were coming. I was taking 3 10-milligram pain pills an hour to get through these exams. I passed Pennsylvania and New Jersey. I'm not proud. I share that because I needed these pills like you need oxygen. You get up, you blink, you don't think about it. I had to have these drugs or I could not get out of bed. I did not realize that for 5 years. 5 years I was in denial. So inevitably, I passed the bar exam. I go away on a trip with the person I was seeing, Spain and Africa. I called in a refill from Spain. I fly home early. I had a clerkship that started. I clerked on the Pennsylvania Superior Court for a former Pennsylvania Supreme Court justice, drafting appellate opinions. Right into chambers with me went my addiction. But I started in August. By December, I had 9 identities going with the same doctor. All these drugs coming to chamber. Signature required 40 pain pills a day to function. I call one day, the doctor suspended. Doctor suspended, and I still thought it was recreational. And that's why sometimes when you talk to people that are struggling, you think like, there's no way they can believe what they're saying. I believed what I was saying. I just thought there had to be a way to stay one ahead of the system. So I started calling in my own prescriptions. No, I'm not a doctor. No, I never went to medical school. No, I don't have my own DEA number. Figured it all out. Started calling in my own scripts. I don't know. And this is while I was a law clerk, licensed in 2 states to practice law. I was calling in prescriptions from the Superior Court, courted both. I'm not proud of it. It's just what the situation was. I don't know that I missed many pharmacies between Collegeville, Pennsylvania and Atlantic City, New Jersey, about 180-mile radius. I added Ambien, I added Xanax to the mix, and obviously my tolerance skyrocketed because my access skyrocketed. I was calling in scripts of 100 with 4 refills. Today, that would get flagged in a heartbeat, but 25 years ago, it didn't. And so inevitably, that clerkship was 1 year. After it, was on to the next thing. And I must have lined up another clerkship while I'm still in law school, because I can't imagine in my addiction that I would have had the energy. I don't have a memory of how this came to be, but I'm sure I lined it up in law school. Another clerkship on the municipal court in Philadelphia for 3 judges, where the accountability was pretty low. They would give me work. I would take it home. I would work on it. Then I would bring it back to chamber. So it was not a peer in court 5 days a week job. That made things even worse as far as my addiction went, because I knew I didn't need to be in the office or show up necessarily. It got so bad that I was actually writing faxes to the judges in crayons and faxing them in a fax machine at like 2:00 in the morning, and my dog had an emergency and I couldn't be there. I mean, I was asked to show up 1 to 2 days a week and I couldn't even do it. Also, during this second clerkship, a friend of mine, we got together. They pulled out a cocaine. Again, I already mentioned I'm not from a family where I've ever seen either of my parents drink or drugs, still to this day. And I looked at the cocaine. Me, mom calling in drugs left and right across 2 states. That's no problem, of course. And I thought, well, that's a serious drug. I did the cocaine. I did not stop taking that drug until my freedom was taken from me. I started about 150 pounds. Within less than 6 weeks, I was literally down to, and you can see, like 110 pounds. It came off rapidly, so much so that my mom contacted the one judge I was clerking for and said, Laurie's going to need some time off. She has an issue to address. I assumed I'm obviously going to rehab. My nose is bleeding. I'm awake for days in a row. My mom had to have figured this out. And so she gave me an address. It was before Waze and MapQuest. It was MapQuest. You just literally printed out the directions, but you didn't know where you were going. There was no Google. And so I show up, and I was awake for 4 days. I'm a cocaine bender, so I brought Dunkin' Donuts, knowing I'd be doing an intake and come down and I'd be able to eat. The bottom line is my mom diagnosed me and thought I had an eating disorder. Never once, and she will admit this, we presented many times together, ever even considered that I could have possibly had a drug problem. Never even considered. She assumed I had an eating disorder problem, brought me to an eating disorder facility where, after hours of observation, including having me eat the food I brought and not asked to be excused, they refused to admit me. And my mom thought I was gaming the system. Bottom line, she went left, I went right. In that left and right, 4 years passed. Ultimately, between 2002 and 2004, I was arrested 5 times. 1 time for DUI, 4 for felony prescription fraud in 2 states. 29 car accidents, 3 incarcerations, 3 rehabilitations. And every time I got arrested without bail, I'm like, but I'm an attorney. No, you're a defendant, you're a criminal, you're a felon, is really. And I just remember me going like as if that would be the ego get out of jail card. And January 29, 2004 is my sobriety date. And on that day, it was a volunteer from the exact organization that I worked for that called my house, called the police station as I was typing my own statement. Don't ask. I know it's not great legal advice. In my case, it worked out, but that's definitely not something to do. And then came to the prison to visit me that day, almost 20 years ago, and brought me a message of hope and recovery. And he said, I'm in recovery. I'm 31 years sober. There are thousands of us. And I'm like, what? I thought I was unique. I don't have uniquers on. I thought I was the only person in the world in this profession that's got a drug problem. And he said, there are meetings. There's this organization, Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers. And I'm like, oh my God, I remember that guy in law school, the one I felt bad for. Yeah, as I'm in prison, I'm remembering my predecessor. And so Dave kept showing up, and I didn't understand why he told me to start going to AA meetings, NA meetings, do whatever I had to do to start working on myself. I had no intention. I didn't even think I could stay sober. And so I spent 11 and a half months incarcerated. January 29, 2004 is my sobriety date. When I went into prison, I was 110 pounds at the weigh-in, and I'm 5'9", so that's definitely a problem. When I left prison, at this picture here, I was 253 pounds 11 and a half months later. Food simply became my next drug in prison. At this point, afterwards, I got very involved with LCL after I was released. I was obviously on parole. And I reported everything to the Pennsylvania Disciplinary Board, and I was suspended 3 years. I entered a voluntary joint petition for suspension in Pennsylvania for 3 years, then in New Jersey for 3 years. I mean, how I wasn't disbarred, I can't even tell you. And I worked in the law firm. Dave let me get the job. I got very involved in recovery meetings. I started bringing recovery meetings to the prison where I was an inmate. 2008, I filed for reinstatement because Dave told me to. How could a convicted felon get reinstated? I couldn't even go to cosmetology school and get a state issued license, but he thinks I can get my license to practice law back. So ultimately I filed for reinstatement, and by a miracle, much greater than myself. I was reinstated to the practice of law in Pennsylvania in 2009, and then in New Jersey in 2010. And then in 2011, I came on board with this organization that saved my life because I'm the product we sell. Hey, look at my great family, and I almost died. If I did not get stopped, if the system did not stop me, I would be dead 20 years ago. And so I work with amazing people like Tracy, and we share this story to let people know that there's so much hope out there. As long as somebody is breathing, that there's hope. So since I've been with LCL, I filed for a governor's pardon that was supported by the Chief Justice on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court at the time by letter, as well as the judge that sent me to prison. Every single one of those times, including the last time for a year, stood at the podium at the pardon hearing asking the governor to pardon me. Ultimately, that's me holding my pardon. I was pardoned in 2020. And the reason that I asked for a pardon was because there were things I wanted to do. I regretted never serving the country. And I said I would consider, maybe being a volunteer firefighter. I'm now 6 months into that process. And I needed a clear record to be able to do it. In this other picture, you can see there, me and my sister, we were both artificial insemination. 2017, I sent my DNA to 23andMe, and I literally have now found 11 siblings, and my biological father that is in that picture, and a couple of the siblings I found are in that picture. And I say to people all the time, get sober. At 13 years sober, you get a whole new family. Every time I see 23andMe, you have matches. I'm like, oh my God, new sibling alert. And what an amazing journey it's been. I was approved to donate a kidney in 2013. I do a lot of work with animal rescue. I take my one dog, there's Maisie, to memory care. I bring her to the law schools. She's been to the state capitol. And I volunteer to rescue every Saturday, all because folks that work and volunteer with LAPS do the work that they do. There's Dave. There's also the district attorney that prosecuted me, that sent me to prison for a year. We've shared our story from American to Harvard. It's been the New York Times. I've been to Peloton, which I'm a huge Peloton enthusiast. There's several friends of mine that are judges. And again, I went from literally knocking on death's door at 110 pounds to being given this gift of life because somebody else cared enough to pay it forward to me. So that is the way to set the stage for the program. I'm now going to turn it back over to Tracy to talk a little bit about more of the actual data and statistics.
Laurie, it's such a powerful story. It's so important because it really does show this incredible road. And one person's story is going to morph into, I hate going after you because it seems so anticlimactic, but we hear one person's story and then we share some of the data about the profession as a whole. And some of the data you may have heard already, came out of a 2016 study done by the American Bar Association and Hazelden Betty Ford to treatment facilities, looking at American lawyers. They looked at about 13,000 lawyers, and they did a study on not only problematic alcohol usage, but also substance use, as well as some mental health issues. And some of the data that they found really was life-changing for those of us in this community. We always thought, it sort of turned us on our ears. We always thought that it was the more seasoned professional who suffered from these issues to a greater extent. And what we found is it's Completely not true. It is the younger professional, the lawyer who is out of law school for 10 years or less, or who is under 30, that is really suffering at to a greater extent. You can see some of the data of, the entire population, licensed attorneys and judges, and then the statistics for those attorneys under 30, where we are suffering or where there's suffering with problematic alcohol usage. Also, again, study on depression, anxiety, stress, remembering that all this data was before COVID. So I think these numbers have only increased, and we'll see some data about that later. 28% of all attorneys responding that they are suffering from some sort of depression, stress, anxiety. And these results were similar in that we saw younger attorneys suffering from these issues at a greater percentage than their more seasoned counterparts. Every year, for the past 5 or 6 or so, ALM and law.com has actually run a survey of about 3,800 attorneys. And I think this year's numbers were particularly important or surprising, but not in a good way, in that this year we're seeing increases. Right? 5% increases in the number of attorneys who said that they had some anxiety. A 35% increase over the year before of attorneys dealing with depression. The number of lawyers who actually struggled with another mental health issue more than doubled in 1 year. We're seeing, lawyers not taking their vacation time, worrying about taking time off, that their career is going to be, they're going to have trouble at work. If I take a leave of time to deal with some of the issues that I'm facing, either mental health or substance use issues, it might impact my career. The kinds of things that people are seeing. They're not sleeping. They feel an incredible pressure because of the billable hour. They can't disconnect. This being on 24/7, 365 is having a really deleterious effect on their well-being. Few other recent studies that I will stress or that I will bring to your attention. One done in, I think it was 2021, called Stress Drink Leave. It really was talking about the gender disparity that we are seeing in the profession right now, where 1 in 4 women is actually thinking about leaving the profession altogether because of these concerns, because of the mental health concerns. We see some, leaving the profession from men as well, but with women, there is a greater disparity. The other survey, it was called Stressed, Lonely, and Overcommitted. It was a survey of lawyers in the District of Columbia, as well as New York, about 2,000 of them. And it was focused on suicide, quite frankly. And that lawyers, are 2 times more likely as the general population to contemplate suicide. And unfortunately, one of the main factors in this, or focus in this study, was male lawyer, right? A notable difference there. The highest risk, a lonely or socially isolated male with a high level of unmanageable stress and overly committed to their work, who may have a history of mental health problems, being at the highest risk. So Laurie, I'll turn it back to you to talk about, what is it? Why are lawyers different? Are we doing something different? Is there something about our makeup that is making these numbers so high for us as a profession?
Well, I, for one, thought I had sneakers on. So, and before I even launch into address this slide, I want to just take a moment to follow up on the slide you just presented. And any information I share, it's not confidential. Anything I'm sharing is from the newspaper, so anybody could Google that and read it. So in Pennsylvania, and I've shared this, as often as I can, there was an attorney, a very well-known, prominent attorney, Slade McLaughlin, in Philadelphia, very successful practice. You can Google it. And during the pandemic, and as the pandemic was, 2021, you could tell that his stress levels were high. I did not know him personally. I will say he never called LCL. So everything I am going to share is because I was at his visitation. People were sharing text messages. There was an article in law.com as well as the Philadelphia Inquirer. Further perpetuating the stigma, the titles of the articles in the Philadelphia Inquirer and law.com were Force of Nature, and Larger Than Life. Okay, and I think by saying that, we're indicating somebody of that stature, how likely would they be to struggle? And the answer is, as long as somebody had blood flowing in their veins, they are equally opportunist to have an issue. So Mr. McLaughlin had expressed to people he lost 30 pounds. He had expressed to people that going back and transitioning back into court was a lot for him, and clearly shared this. It was in articles. Yet he chose, because he felt he had no choice, and died by suicide. He left behind a beautiful wife, children. When I went to his visitation, I was standing there hours. There were that many people there, and people were reading text, and I kept hearing over and over again, but we never thought this could happen to him. Okay, there is no this, there is no him. He's not the only person. Every person on here knows somebody that they were shocked when they heard the person died by suicide. Shocked if it's not Robin Williams, if it's not Anthony Bourdain or Kate Spade. Success has nothing to do with anything when you're struggling with mental health. And that's why it's so important. If you or somebody you know is struggling, be their voice. Because can people pick up a phone and really ask for help on a phone that's 5,000 pounds? Mr. McLaughlin couldn't. Robin Williams couldn't. So the answer is, it's really difficult to ask for help. But why so much in our profession? The minute we walk into law school, we are told, this is the beginning of your professional life. Welcome here. You are here you're going to learn how to solve people's problems. You're going to learn how to think your way out of things, and you're going to help think other people out of things. You will literally be the problem solver. So what happens when the problem is ours? Oh, me? I thought I could think my way out of it. I thought I'll go to a different state. I won't get arrested. I'll go to a different county. Fail. I never even, and I'm admitting this, so help me God, never even in 5 years of my addiction did I consider calling or asking for help. I thought I would just do enough drugs and die. I never even knew that there was possibly a way out. So I want to talk briefly about this slide, the conspiracy of silence. People often don't want to call lawyers' assistance programs. And I will say there's a lawyer, and I will touch on this a little bit later, but there's a lawyer's assistance program in every single state in the United States. Some are run a little differently than others. Some are funded a little differently. What I can tell you, if you're on this program, you're watching it on demand. If you are struggling with something and you don't want to call your state lawyer's assistance program, you call Pennsylvania. We will help you. We don't need to know who you are. Conspiracy of silence. So when I actually was clerking on the Superior Court and I was having drugs delivered to chambers, and I've never even talked about this, but it's kind of in line with this. I had clerked with, there were four other law clerks. There was another 1-year law clerk like myself. And he saw what was going on. And he actually started calling the doctor and doing the same thing. And almost, just jumped on the recreational wagon while this was going on. And then he went on his way after the year and I went on my way. That's not exactly the conspiracy of silence, but knowing something is going on and going out of your way. This situation presented to us literally in the last 2 weeks. One partner called, this was the dedicated equity partner, was calling on behalf of a firm. 3 equity partners concerned about a 4th equity partner. The other 2 were not willing to get on the phone initially. And the partner said to me, we have an equity partner number 4, who binge drinks. And as soon as the trial is over, picks up alcohol. And the way our firm handles this is we just shut his email down so he cannot cause liability or issues for the firm. And I listened to this, and I've been doing this for many years, and I have never heard anything like this. And I said, and who thinks that that's solving a problem? He's a lucrative partner. He brings a lot of money in. He's been to rehab. It didn't work. And so, of course, I was like, we need to get all three of those partners on a conference call, on a video call. I am happy as a person in recovery to talk about this. That is not solving a problem. That person can also get on the road and kill somebody. So maybe your firm's not liable technically, but you as employers and partners have a responsibility to, when you're supervising or you have information about somebody that is struggling. I will say most states, when you call the lawyer's assistance program, you are covering your responsibility instead of having to report somebody. But I'll let Tracy deal more with that. The bottom line is there are exceptions to the duty to report. But what I can tell you is doing nothing or just shutting down an email system is definitely not going to help somebody get their life together. Ultimately, we came up with a plan. They had this person call us because otherwise they were going to dissolve his partnership. Eddie is now going to treatment. And like I said, I don't care if somebody's been to treatment. I went to multiple rehabs and prison. And at the end of the day, when you finally stop digging, that's when you hit rock bottom. So I said to them, I didn't care how many times he went and failed. How do you know this won't be the time if you're laying his partnership as the consequences on the table? So the whole point is don't do nothing. And I'm going to now turn it back over to Tracy to talk a little bit about what other states are seeing and doing.
And I like to bring this slide up because, and one of the things I should have said in the opening is, prior to coming to CNA, I had about 20 years in the attorney regulatory field, investigating and prosecuting attorneys. And I, while I'm not recovering myself, I saw this firsthand. I saw it from the attorneys who were coming before me. I saw it when they were there for a sworn statement or for a deposition and they were under the influence. I saw it when they would tell me I didn't even open the letters from the disciplinary authority. I was so anxious. I was so afraid. It would make me so depressed. And so I'd like to show some of the statistics that we're seeing from around the country. Many of the regulatory agencies keep these statistics. Illinois is one jurisdiction that actually publishes these demographics or these statistics in their annual reports. And you can see that on the slide in front of you. I also like to say, and Laurie and I were talking about this before we got started, discipline, taking someone's license away doesn't make the lawyer well. We have to have other ways of seeking treatment, of probation, of diversion, of something so that we can get this attorney back to an even level where they can practice effectively, where they can seek treatment, where they can get on this road to redemption, as we've seen from Laurie's study. It's a lot of data out there that says 25 to 30% of lawyers facing disciplinary charges suffer from some sort of addiction or mental illness. That figure jumps up to 60% when you add in legal malpractice issues. One of the things that we like to say is, lawyers who don't appropriately address these issues harm the system, they harm their clients, they destroy their careers. And as we've seen and we've talked about, and Laurie gave you her story and the story of a colleague in Pennsylvania, sometimes they lose their lives. We have to do something. And so when we see someone, Laurie, what are we supposed to do? How do we identify those signs in ourselves and in others? And how can we approach that colleague from a place of concern rather than, accusatory?
Absolutely. I think that's a great question. That's the $1 million question, probably the most important thing you can even hear on this program. Most people don't want to have a tough conversation with somebody because what if you're wrong? Okay, but what if you're right? What if you're right and what if it's your call that saves a life? Very quickly in statistics, 1/3 of all of our calls come in because a third party calls concerned about somebody else. We either call somebody or guide that person that's concerned to have a conversation with the person they're concerned about. 80 to 90% of those calls being approached have gone on to accept one of LCL's services. That is a remarkable number because somebody else cared enough to pick up the phone for them. The bottom line is nobody, whether you're in recovery, not in recovery, especially in the legal profession, Nobody likes to be told what to do. Nobody. So when you are in general, the bottom line is don't turn away. Do not turn away. We all know people. We even know ourselves. We all have a baseline. Everyone's baseline is different, but we know when we're off. We even say to people, I'm sorry, you know what? I felt off. I could tell I didn't sleep. But you get that feeling as we're sitting here talking. There might be somebody that's coming to mind like, I was worried about that person. They haven't shown up to 2 meetings. Don't let that thought go. If it's in your gut, trust it. There's something wrong. You can always call Lawyers Assistance Program and we'll help guide you on how to have a conversation. But very simply, this is the bottom line. Approaching somebody with the way you're affiliated with them. Like, so if I was concerned about Tracy and we'll just say, her stress level, I would say, Tracy, we've known each other for years. We've presented together. And I think the world of you. I always can feel your energy and your enthusiasm through a program. Then you say, and your language is so important, I've noticed that you seem to be off from your normal baseline a bit. It seems, the words are seems like, appears to be, not you are, but it appears to be. And I just want you to know if that is in fact true, that there's a resource that's available just for you. And whether you pitch the Lawyers Assistance Program, whether you offer to make a call to a therapist with them, and at the end of the conversation, don't diagnose them. Even if she smelled like alcohol, I would not say it appears you have an alcohol issue. If you miss the mark, you've now shut down the entire conversation. You just say it appears something might be going on. And I just wanted you to know about this resource. Give the resource at the end. You just say, you know what? If I'm wrong, I apologize. I just care. There is no way to get that wrong. You planted a seed. Somebody knows you care. They know that you see them, and they know that you're a safe lifeline for them. Like I mentioned, in my own addiction, I had many interventions, and I don't mean to always pick on my mom, but she's a very easy target. She was very involved, and she still is. But she would sit down in these interventions and be like, if you don't go to treatment, then I'm going to stop doing this. I'm going to stop supporting you. And I would say to her, and after telling you all the things I did, which I knew what I did them. And I would say, do you promise you're going to stop calling me every day? And she said, if you don't go to treatment, okay, then I wouldn't go to treatment, and she wouldn't do anything different. The bottom line is you don't need to ever list to somebody the things that you saw that brought this conversation about. By the time you're having a conversation with somebody, or by the time you're calling a Lawyers Assistance Program, you are angry. They've missed deadlines. If it's a spouse, they haven't come home. You are angry. And you want to be heard, and you want to tell them and list all the things they've done. But you have to check your motives. If your motives are you really want to help somebody, none of that is productive. It just does not yield positive results. All you need to do is let somebody know you think the world of them, you care, they seem a little off. Here's a resource. If not, you just wanted them to know how much you care about them. No way to get that wrong.
And to your point too, Laurie, one of the things I love on this list is the diagnose. My husband always says, Tracy, JD doesn't mean MD. I am not there to say what it is, what I think it is, what, Wikipedia or WebMD thinks it is. I am there just to be a caring voice that reaches out. I want to shift gears just a little bit to talk about some of the model rules of professional conduct that are in place when we talk about, well-being, when we talk about partners in a firm, when we talk about obligations of someone who has supervisory responsibility over another. And we're really looking at 5.1A, and I'm talking about the model rules here. You have that responsibility. You have to have steps in place, reasonable efforts to ensure that everyone in the firm, including, non-lawyer assistants, are complying with their obligations under the rules. And we have to, think about Laurie's scenario. Just shutting off the email is not going to be a reasonable effort. New Mexico even took it a little bit further, and I really like their rule where, sometimes I think we as lawyers need, precise, exact, direct instruction. And this rule sets it out for you in New Mexico. Look, if you see this, here's what you do. 1, 2, 3. I think 3 should be first, speaking with the lawyer and encouraging the lawyer to seek appropriate medical care. But they give you other guidance. Look, reach out to the lab, make a confidential report, or report if it's so severe and clients are being harmed or are threatened with being harmed, reach out to the disciplinary organization or the regulatory organization. There are also ABA opinions as well as legal ethics opinions in Virginia and DC that I think are particularly good, talking about a firm being proactive in this regard, getting on board, creating a culture, a positive culture of well-being in the firm, doing something, taking steps before it becomes a problem. Some other responsibilities of the impaired lawyer, maybe you need to withdraw. Maybe you need to terminate the representation. And you also have to think about your duty of confidence. Is your legal skill, knowledge, thoroughness, preparation being diminished as a result of a mental health issue or a substance use problem? And then also reaching out to that lab or the treatment provider, getting the help that you need. Luckily for us, we are seeing changes around the country where state jurisdictions recognize that at its core, you need to be a healthy lawyer to comply with your other ethical obligations. Vermont has already changed the comments to their rules, saying, look, mental, emotional, physical well-being may have an impact on your duty to represent, on your ability, I should say, to represent clients. Virginia also changed its rules. California changed the black letter rule. And just recently, in May, we saw Utah add a comment to their rules. The American Bar Association is also looking at changing some of the language as well. What do you do? What is the Lawyer's Assistance Program? I mean, what are they going to do for you, Laurie? If we say reach out to them, how are they going to help?
That's a great question. We save lives, but it doesn't need to be a story as extreme as mine. I will just speak on Pennsylvania because I'm obviously seated in Pennsylvania, but we realize you could be seated anywhere. Pennsylvania is 24/7. Almost every single lawyer's assistance program is 24/7. These issues aren't 9 to 5. If it was only 9 to 5, I would never make it to the next day. So we understand that 2:00 in the morning, if somebody's willing, window of opportunity is this small. What does the lawyer's assistance do? We offer a range of confidential, as in you do not even need to give your name when you call. I don't care what state you're in. You can call and say, my name is Anonymous. I'm an attorney. I'm struggling with blank. And how can you help me? We offer Pennsylvania. We have the healthcare providers therapists. We have 152 across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Every lawyer's assistance program either has in-house therapeutic supports or refers out, but we pay for the initial session. And if somebody needs financial help thereafter, we will get it covered. That's the bottom line. We expect that when people call us, they are down on their luck. They may not have insurance. They may need resources in addition to supports for mental health and substance use. They may need living support. So a lawyer's assistance program, besides having a therapeutic component, we have volunteers. It's now become termed the DAVE. The gentleman that reached out and passed the message on to me, we have 315 DAVEs, lawyers, judges, family members, law students. So when you call, you'll talk to someone you feel you can identify with. We also have a ton of literature and information on all of our websites. We also all have staff. I think there may only be 1 or 2 labs that only have 1 executive director, but we have staff. So when you're struggling, we can get supports in place. If you're considering or you have a family member considering going to treatment, you call us. We'll take care of arranging everything down to transportation. When somebody is struggling in your life, in your firm, it's an emergency. You can't take the time to call the phone number on the back of your card. I mean, you can, but it's really difficult to do all of that. The bottom line is we are here to support your lives. In Pennsylvania, we support staff. We support anybody that is in your life that may be struggling. Because if they're struggling, it's impacting you. We also have and almost every lab has recovery support meetings. Doesn't mean AA, doesn't mean NA. It just means you are an attorney in recovery from a substance use or mental health disorder, and the folks come together. Sometimes people in Pennsylvania feel more comfortable attending the Texas meetings. They're virtual. So it's possible to do those things. Interventions. This is another big one. I already talked about this. If you're concerned about somebody, even if you cannot be involved, even if you call the lawyer's assistance program and say, I was in court with somebody, I cannot be involved, they're opposing counsel, this is the attorney's name, they're struggling. Call us, give us the opportunity to reach out to somebody. Let us offer a lifeline. Will we call somebody? They know we're not the disciplinary board. We're not even connected to the disciplinary board. When we call, it's because somebody cared enough to pick up the phone to call to try to give them a lifeline. That's why 80 to 90% of the cold calls that we make, people accept support and resources. They appreciate that people care. I'm going to turn it back over to you, Tracy, because I want you to talk about what the firm can do.
Sure. Briefly, we heard about a situation where perhaps the firm didn't act in the best way that they could. And I think there are a whole bunch of things that the firm should do and can do to focus on these issues. And it really is a cultural change across the board. And you can see from this slide, which is taken from an International Bar Association survey, people want improved workplace culture. That is what's going to make the difference. Decreasing the stigma, increasing levels of openness, a culture of mutual respect around these issues, as well as this direct intervention and support. This place of coming from I care makes a difference. In addition, there are all kinds of impairment policies that firms can put in place, well-being templates that address impairments, that talk about how, if you need to take a leave of absence, if there needs to be a referral to treatments, maybe it's just what you're doing. Maybe you were not meant to be a litigator. Maybe appellate work is better for you. Whatever it is, a change of scenery so that you can still work, you can still be productive, but it might help with some of the issues that you're facing. In addition, having a well-being committee, or at least someone designated in the firm separate and apart from the HR department who can talk about these issues. Confidential reporting procedures, working hand in hand, developing a partnership with the labs to make it possible. And one more I'll talk about before I turn it back over to Laurie, and it's something that we've heard about through COVID and we're still continuing to hear about. Plus, it's one of the Surgeon General's main concerns. There's a difference between, being alone and loneliness, combating that isolation, and really encouraging interconnectivity. You can partner, you can see people, you can talk, you can discuss. It's so key for really working to combat signs of work addiction and rooting out these kinds of problems in a proactive manner on the firm's part before you have to be reactive. So Laurie, as we close, what can one person do? What kind of difference can one person make in their own lives and changes that people can put in place in their own lives to help on this path?
One person, Dave, reached out to me, and here I sit 19 years later, and the thousands of people I've been able to share this story with, which is our story. You never know when you help somebody what's going to happen with that person. But in order to before we can even dive into, and I know you're going to interrupt with codes in about a minute, so we're ready for that. Whenever you guys are going to do that, we will wrap the program up in about 2 minutes. But I just want to talk briefly about boundaries. We kick off the holidays regardless of whether you're watching this on demand and it's February, but in November we kick off starting the holidays. November. Okay, the word no, how many of us were like the holidays, but we're so overbooked? Nobody thinks, what do I want my holiday to look like? No, I'm going to bake cookies. I'm going to do this, but la 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 la. I mean, put up the tree, see the lights. We are all so stressed out because we're so overcommitted. The bottom line is you have to be a priority. That includes, and we were just talking about this before the program, if you are out of your office, if you're on vacation, if you're traveling for work, if you are attending a show with your family, and you put an away message on your email, trust that people can actually deal with that and you don't need to respond. I was just on a trip in South Africa responding to emails that weren't even urgent. Using the away message, it handles itself, it sends itself for every email. Monitoring all of your screen time. We do not realize how much time we spend on screens. If we realized how limited time was and it's our only non-renewable resource, we would spend a lot less time staring at screens than we actually do. Next slide, if you can go to the next slide. Even before the pandemic, I was guilty of this. I'd say, everybody, have a nice weekend. I'm leaving. Shut down everything, get in my car, turn on my phone, and start responding to emails. The point is, just like our phones need a hard reset from time to time, so do we. Many of us think, oh, no, I don't need sleep. I can stay up and work all night. I only need 3 to 4 hours. Really? Google it. You're wrong. You need 7 to 8 hours. And if you think you don't, imagine how fabulous you'll feel if you think you only need 3 to 4, but you get 7 to 8. Google it. When I presented at Harvard, I picked up their law record because I didn't go to Harvard, obviously. I just wanted to know what the article would say, and it was on wellness. And the number one article in Harvard's law record said, buy yourself an alarm clock. And I'm like, I need Harvard to tell me to buy an alarm clock. And the message in the entire article was, how many of us sleep with our phone next to our head? Right next to your head. You go to sleep, your phone's right there because you need to know what time it is. Buy an alarm clock, because how many of us look at our phone in the middle of the night to see what time it is, and boom, you realize you missed somebody's birthday. Oh my God, the brief was due. You forgot to respond to that text. There goes your sleep. What do you think the most important thing is sleep? Manage your apps. I will just say I watched a TED talk that indicated we spend 3 times the amount of time on apps that make us unhappy versus apps that make us happy. There's a list of them. The ones that make us happy, what's the difference? They have an ending cue. It's an exercise. It's over in 45 minutes. It's a relaxation meditation. It's over in 5 minutes. The unhappy ones, doom scrolling. It just never, ever ends. And we have family and pets and people we care about that are standing around us, waiting for our time and attention. And instead, we are scrolling our lives away on time. It's not like we get a notice that somebody says, hey, you're going to die in 30 days. No, we live and act like we have time forever, and we simply don't. Stay in your own lane. This is something I learned in recovery. Just stay in your own lane. Stop comparing yourself to people that walk on the red carpet. I'm sure everyone here is gorgeous, but we're not red carpet walkers. I'm not. And so by comparing myself to Cindy Crawford and her skin is just a very unreasonable comparison. Stay in your own lane. How are you doing compared to yesterday? Scheduling self-care time. That doesn't mean go run on a Peloton for an hour. 1 hour a day. I don't care if you sit in the closet. It's 4% of your life. You owe that gift of 1 hour a day to yourself. The rest of the world needs you those other 23 hours. Give yourself that 1 hour. Create a boundary, put a wall up, and it's 1 hour of time for you. If you communicate that to the people that live in your house or they're in your office, you're going to be shocked. They're going to respect that boundary. You may even encourage somebody else to do something. So at this point, there are some other stress busters that we have listed. Go through the materials. They're here. Meditation, being mindful. How many of us eat at our desks? I don't know about you. Obviously, you've heard I have food issues. I wait all day to eat. So I'm like plotting the next meal as I'm eating one. But then somehow it's okay to sit in front of a screen and shovel my food in as if that's not the highlight of my day. No. Be mindful. Get off of screens for 5 minutes to give yourself the gift of mindful eating and knowing what food feels like. 3 out of 7 people in our office actually tread desks, and we walk and we work. And that's not multitasking, believe it or not. It's not 2 executive functions of the brain. So you actually can do it. If I can do it, anybody can do it. So, and just making sure you take your screen break. So go through the rest of the materials. I am going to stop here. I don't want to hold everybody up. But we're wishing you all a wonderful afternoon, holiday season. We are available for questions. You have our emails. We realize this is not something normally people will put in a chat if they have a question. if you or somebody you love is struggling and you don't want to call your state LAF, which is listed in the materials, call Pennsylvania. I'm more than happy to personally speak to you. Do not struggle in silence. Please use the story I shared so Slade's death is not in vain, please. Thank you all so much for your attendance today.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you both so much for that wonderful presentation and for being here today. We can jump into audience questions. It looks like we already have a couple, so I'll go ahead and start there. And if anyone else has them that they'd like to send in, just please click that Q&A button at the control panel at the bottom of your screen and go ahead and submit. All right. It looks like we've got a couple. The first one is, in cases where an attorney's impairment is directly linked to job-related stress, should law firms and legal organizations be held accountable for creating work environments that contribute to mental health challenges, and how can that be enforced?
I mean, go ahead. You want to take that, Tracy?
I mean, it goes back to the modern rules would say yes, right? We are obligated under Rule 5.1 to have reasonable efforts in place so that everyone, lawyers, supervisors, non-lawyers are complying with their obligations under the rules. And I think it really goes to a culture in the firm that we have to look at. What are we doing? How are we monitoring for work addiction? Are we taking a baseline measure of our firm and then putting in resources, training, webinars, whatever it is, to help deal with those issues? One of the things that I suggest is if when you're starting this process in a firm, taking a baseline, and I don't mean biometrical data, what is your weight, height, blood pressure? I mean, questions like, do you feel comfortable talking about mental health issues in the workplace? And then you put in some training, some resources around those and measure the effect or the change that you are having. The last thing I will say about this, and I'll give it to Laurie, is oftentimes it comes from the top. When we see leadership modeling behavior, when we see peers sharing their stories, saying it's okay not to be okay, it goes a long way to smashing the stigma around these issues and making everyone feel comfortable and open about talking about them, which goes hand in hand with reducing, like I said, the problems. Be proactive instead of reactive.
That's a great answer. I can almost not add anything to that except LCL in Pennsylvania. We have a very strong relationship with a very large and respected international law firm. And about right before the pandemic, I would say I'm like 18 or 19, we started doing CLEs for this firm, almost because they wanted to introduce these topics that are never talked about in an environment. This was before the wellness pledges. Like, this was about that time. The research had come out and it was now time to start doing something. And at first, I remember thinking, oh my God, I'm sharing my story and people are going to be like, why do we have this person here? What does she have to do? She's not working in big law. And over time, they had us quarterly for programs from imposter syndrome, substance use, mental health, stress, impaired professional, you name it, we were there for it. Compassion fatigue. Because of now they run these programs quarterly and their own people are now sharing their own stories. So what was my role? To light a fire within. And then I actually was invited to speak at their partners retreat. And as amazing as that was, obviously I almost stroked out because I was like, here are all the partners from this very respected firm. And when I speak, imposter syndrome is what I was feeling. And I got a standing ovation. And their actions to change the culture of their firm lit a match within. And that continues without me. Now I don't even present there now, but I stay in touch with them and provide resources as they need them. So leading by example, I think, is a great one, Tracy.
Thank you both for that insight, and that's a great example of how that can be done. Another question that we have here is, how do you go about rebuilding trust with colleagues and clients after addressing substance abuse issues?
I'm happy to take that one. I mean, and this isn't even just professional, but even personal. By the time somebody has gone to treatment or gotten themselves together or well, people around them are pretty tired. They're tired of hearing, I'm sorry. They're tired of hearing this time will be different. And what I can say, the greatest amends you can make is time. You will not hear me say I will stay sober the rest of my life. You will hear me on occasion still apologize for things that may or may not have happened that I don't remember. But I know my greatest amends is to do the next right thing and do everything I can to use my experience to help somebody else. So I think without pointing that out, I will say I have rectified. I mean, obviously, I had the Chief Justice offer to write his first and only letter of support on behalf of my pardon. He was on the Supreme Court the entire time through my addiction, and I didn't know him, but he decided to write a letter. So I think by doing the next right thing and showing up to pay that forward, I think is the best answer that I can give on that. We all want things, to happen immediately, but I will say, and I sometimes in the program have the time to make the analogy. We don't often view, and whether you buy the disease concept or not of substance use and mental health, it is a medical diagnosis. So if somebody had cancer, what do? They go to the oncologist, they get a treatment plan, they share it with loved ones, colleagues, people rally around them in support. And then if they're in remission, we rally about that. If somebody comes out of remission and needs to get treatment again, what do? We stand right by them and encourage them. But when it's substance use and mental health, people start to lose trust in us, and we have to start to try to keep these conversations going so people have the same empathy and compassion, and I've said to people, listen, you know how far away from a relapse I am? I don't care how many 19 plus years I have. I'm 1 arm's distance away from a relapse. 1 arm's distance. And what would happen if I relapse? Would every person that supported me hate me? And people just need to be empathetic and understand at the end of the day, we're all humans just walking each other home. So whether it's cancer or whether it is substance use where the person struggling does play a small role in lighting the match, or whether it's mental health, nobody asks for these things. Not one person on that poster board said, I want to be a felon or I'd like to be an inmate when I'm older. I didn't say it. I don't think anybody else in prison with me said it. So I think just having empathy, compassion, and just doing the best you can to do the next right thing and know that you're doing the best you can, because that amends really has to be to yourself first and foremost.
I think Laurie's word about time is critical, not only on the front end, but on the back end. I think a lot of people who want to approach, who are caring and concerned and empathetic are very afraid. And when you do approach someone, you'd like it to be like, oh, yes. And they respond, oh, yes, I do have an issue. Let's go to treatment. That's not the way it works. There's not a ta-da. I mean, oftentimes they are angry. They are as lawyers, we are the master of spin. Oh, no, it's not me. Who's saying that about me? Well, look at Laurie. She's, XYZ. And so I think not only, the timing of picking the right time to have this conversation, it may just happen, serendipitously, but also time on the back end. It will take time for the person that you reached out to, for the person in recovery. And it's just that element of it is key on the front and the back.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much. I think, empathy and time, those 2 words, that makes so much sense with everything that you guys have shared today. I think we have time for one more question, so I'll go ahead and ask. The last one is, for remote work, how do licensing boards address the challenges of monitoring and addressing impairment issues in virtual professional environments?
I can't say that there is there's a legal ethics opinion or that there's a rule of professional conduct that specifically speaks to a remote working or hybrid work. While there certainly are all kinds of ethics opinions out there that talk about what we need to look out for, I think one of the keys is exactly what I just said, what we need to look out for. oftentimes with hybrid and remote work, we are working by ourselves. All we're seeing is, maybe the sequencing of a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting. We're not seeing that person in person. We're having a very difficult time measuring or deciphering, is there an issue? Is there a problem? What's different here? And so I think one of the things that Laurie said earlier is really looking for deviations from the baseline. Who is this person? Who are they typically? Maybe they're always, itchy, scratchy, cranky, and irritable. Maybe they're always, sort of calm as opposed to excited. You're looking for changes from that baseline. And when you can recognize those and you're keyed into those go a long way to seeing, is this person okay? Are they complying with their obligations under competence, diligence, communication? And those are the kinds of things that we monitor for.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your thoughtful answers to those questions. And thank you to everyone who submitted a question. We're almost out of time for today, so I'm going to go ahead and hand things back over to Marina to wrap things up. Thank you both.
Yeah, thanks, Nina, and thanks, Laurie, and thanks, Tracy. And most of all, thanks to all of you for being here today. We certainly appreciate you took the time out of your day to hear this valuable information, and we hope you enjoyed the presentation. Thanks again to all of you for being here today. Have a great rest of your afternoon and a fantastic rest of your week.
Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did enjoy it, please click the like button and subscribe to our channel for more videos on law practice and legal marketing. See you in our next video.